Once hailed as the front page of the internet, Reddit began as a wild experiment in online freedom. A place where millions of voices collided, where memes were born, revolutions were organized, and strangers from across the globe connected through communities called subreddits. It was raw, messy, and unlike anything the world had seen before. But what looked like a utopia of free speech quickly revealed its darker side. The same freedom that fueled creativity also sheltered toxicity, exploitation, and scandals that would haunt the platform for decades. From notorious subreddits spreading disturbing content to leadership decisions that alienated its most loyal users, Reddit became a battlefield where ideals of open internet clashed with the harsh reality of running a billion-dollar business. In recent years, the stakes have only grown higher. As Reddit pushes toward becoming a publicly traded company, accusations of censorship, data exploitation, and selling out its community paint a picture of a platform caught between its rebellious roots and corporate survival. Tonight, we uncover how Reddit's rise was built not just on innovation, but also on scandal. This is the untold story of how the internet's loudest community became its most controversial stage, and why the scars it carries may never fully heal. Reddit was founded in 2005 by Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian, two young entrepreneurs who wanted to create something radically different from the polished, commercialized internet of the early 2000s. Instead of a top-down platform run by editors or corporate executives, Reddit was built on the idea that users themselves would decide what mattered. Posts could be upvoted or downvoted, and the most popular content naturally rose to the top. This simple system gave birth to a culture of participation that felt electric. Unlike traditional media outlets, Reddit offered unfiltered access to the collective voice of the internet. It quickly became a hub for breaking news, inside jokes, and passionate debates. The creation of subreddits, individual communities dedicated to specific topics, allowed Reddit to expand endlessly. Whether you wanted to talk about video games, politics, science, or obscure hobbies, there was a subreddit waiting for you, or you could create one yourself. The sense of empowerment was intoxicating for early users. But this freedom came with a hidden price. In the beginning, Reddit's founders were vocal about their commitment to absolute free speech. They refused to take down content, no matter how offensive or controversial, believing that the community should self-regulate. While this philosophy attracted a fiercely loyal base of internet libertarians, it also opened the door to darker corners of human behavior. Trolls, extremists, and those looking to exploit anonymity found Reddit to be fertile ground. The platform's rapid growth meant it became too large to police effectively, and its reputation as a haven for anything goes quickly spread. The culture of early Reddit thrived on shock value. Users celebrated outrageous posts, provocative discussions, and the type of raw, unfiltered content that mainstream platforms would never allow. This made Reddit a countercultural icon, but it also laid the groundwork for future scandals. By the late 2000s, Reddit had become known both as a home for innovation and as a magnet for controversy. Subreddits that began as harmless communities sometimes spiraled into cesspools of harassment or disturbing imagery. Even as its user base exploded, Reddit's business model lagged behind. Unlike Facebook or Google, which monetized through sophisticated advertising, Reddit struggled to generate consistent revenue. Its survival depended heavily on venture capital funding, which meant investors were watching closely. The tension between community-driven chaos and the need to look respectable in the eyes of advertisers would become one of the platform's greatest challenges. Reddit was stuck in an identity crisis. Was it the internet's last frontier of free expression, or was it destined to become just another sanitized social media company chasing profits? The early days of Reddit were a paradox. On one hand, it was celebrated as a space where marginalized voices and niche interests could flourish. On the other, it was increasingly criticized for hosting content that bordered on the illegal or the grotesque. This dual identity created the perfect storm for future scandals. As the platform grew into millions of daily users, the cracks in its foundation began to show. What started as an idealistic vision of a free internet was slowly morphing into something more dangerous, and soon the world would take notice. By the early 2010s, Reddit had grown into a global powerhouse, but its philosophy of absolute free speech was about to collide with reality in ways that shocked both users and the outside world. The platform became notorious for hosting some of the most disturbing subreddits on the internet communities that thrived in the shadows, while the mainstream celebrated Reddit as a hub of memes news and grassroots activism. Among the most infamous was jailbait, a subreddit dedicated to posting sexualized images of underage girls. For years, it existed largely unchecked, defended by Reddit administrators as a matter of free expression despite public outcry. It wasn't until CNN aired a damning investigation in 2011 that Reddit finally shut it down, but by then, the damage had been done. The scandal stained Reddit's reputation, raising questions about whether the platform was complicit in enabling exploitation under the guise of free speech. The controversies didn't stop there. In 2014, Reddit faced one of its most high-profile crises, the fappening. When hackers leaked a massive cache of stolen nude photos of celebrities, including Jennifer Lawrence and Kate Upton, Reddit quickly became the central hub where the images spread. Subreddits dedicated to hosting and distributing the stolen pictures attracted millions of visitors overnight. While the company eventually took steps to remove the content, it was criticized for reacting too slowly, allowing the invasion of privacy to metastasize. For many, this was the moment Reddit crossed a line. It was no longer just an edgy forum for memes, but a platform actively fueling one of the largest privacy violations in internet history. The media backlash was ferocious, and celebrities condemned Reddit publicly. It was a turning point that forced the company to confront the darker consequences of its laissez-faire policies. Another flashpoint came with r/fatpeopleat, a subreddit that built its entire identity around mocking overweight individuals. While defenders claimed it was just humor, the community regularly encouraged harassment campaigns and cyberbullying. By 2015, Reddit finally banned the subreddit, marking one of the first times it had taken decisive action against a large and popular community. But the decision sparked chaos. Free speech purists accused Reddit of selling out and abandoning its roots, while others argued it had waited far too long to curb hate speech. The debate revealed a deep divide, not just between Reddit and its users, but also within the user base itself. Each of these scandals exposed the impossible balance Reddit tried to maintain. On one side was its image as the free-spirited frontier of the internet, a place where no topic was off-limits. On the other was the growing reality that Reddit was now too big to operate without accountability. Advertisers, journalists, and even governments were watching closely. The platform's refusal to act decisively on harmful content painted it as reckless and irresponsible in the eyes of the mainstream. Investors began to worry about brand safety, and some companies pulled ads wary of being associated with Reddit's toxic subcultures. Internally, these crises highlighted just how fragile Reddit's governance structure really was. Decisions about banning or moderating subreddits were inconsistent, sometimes taking years to implement. The company had no clear policy framework, leaving it to scramble each time a new scandal emerged. This reactive approach made it appear as though Reddit only cared once public outrage reached a boiling point. For a platform that prided itself on community-driven governance, the lack of proactive leadership was glaring. What made these scandals especially damaging was that they revealed a recurring pattern Reddit would tolerate harmful communities until outside pressure forced its hand. That cycle became part of its identity, fueling a narrative that Reddit was a breeding ground for the worst corners of the internet. From child exploitation to hacked celebrity photos to organized harassment campaigns, Reddit became synonymous with controversy. And yet, each time it stumbled, its user base continued to grow. For many outsiders, this was baffling. How could a platform so consistently mired in scandal not only survive, but thrive? The answer lay in the very culture that made Reddit so dangerous in the first place. Users embraced its chaos, treating each controversy not as a reason to leave, but as part of its rebellious appeal. Scandal became a feature, not a bug. But as the world scrutinized Reddit more closely, it became clear that these crises weren't just isolated incidents. They were symptoms of deeper flaws in leadership and philosophy. The stage was set for an even greater reckoning, one that would shake Reddit from within and expose just how unstable the balance of power between its executives and its community had become. If Reddit's early scandals painted it as reckless in the eyes of the public, the crisis of 2015 showed just how fragile the company was on the inside. That year, a single personnel decision would ignite one of the largest revolts in internet history, revealing a deep disconnect between Reddit's leadership and the community it claimed to serve. At the center of it all was Victoria Taylor, a well-respected Reddit employee who coordinated the platform's most high-profile feature, AMAs, or Ask Me Anything sessions. These live interviews had become a cornerstone of Reddit's brand, attracting celebrities, scientists, politicians, and even President Barack Obama. Taylor's reputation for professionalism and her rapport with moderators made AMAs not just popular, but trustworthy. Then, seemingly without warning, Reddit's leadership abruptly fired her in July 2015. The decision stunned moderators, many of whom had relied on Taylor as the bridge between Reddit's corporate staff and its volunteer-driven ecosystem. Within hours of the news-breaking, moderators began locking down their subreddits in protest. Some of the largest communities on the site, including r/science, r/books, and r/music, went dark, effectively bringing Reddit to a halt. What had started as one termination quickly spiraled into a full-scale rebellion, exposing the fragile balance that kept Reddit running. A tiny corporate team depended heavily on unpaid moderators to maintain order across millions of users. Users demanded answers, but Reddit's leadership fumbled the response. Ellen Pao, then the interim CEO, became the face of the crisis. She issued statements that were perceived as vague and dismissive, further fueling anger. The hashtag Reddit Revolt began trending, and petitions calling for her resignation gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. In the eyes of the community, Pao symbolized a leadership disconnected from the grassroots culture that defined Reddit. But Pao's tenure was already controversial before the Taylor incident. She had introduced policies aimed at curbing harassment and hate speech, banning some of Reddit's most toxic communities. While many outside observers applauded these changes, hardcore Redditors saw them as an attack on free speech. To them, Pao was the censor, someone trying to turn Reddit into a sanitized corporate product. The firing of Victoria Taylor was the final straw, reinforcing the belief that Reddit's executives neither understood nor respected the community. The revolt became a spectacle for the global media. Major outlets reported on Reddit's dysfunction, framing it as a cautionary tale about the perils of running an internet platform without strong leadership. Inside the company, morale collapsed. Employees faced harassment and even death threats, while the board of directors scrambled to contain the damage. Just weeks later, Ellen Pao resigned, citing the torrent of abuse and the impossibility of bridging the divide between Reddit's ideals and the realities of running a business. Her departure was hailed as a victory by the revolting users, but it left behind a troubling precedent the Reddit community had successfully forced out a CEO. For all its corporate structure, Reddit was still in practice ruled by its user base. That chaotic power dynamic made it nearly impossible for executives to enforce long-term strategies without risking mutiny. What the crisis revealed most clearly was how dependent Reddit was on its volunteers. Unlike other social networks where algorithms managed content, Reddit relied on tens of thousands of unpaid moderators to maintain its sprawling network of subreddits. When those moderators revolted, the entire system collapsed. The company's lack of contingency plans showed just how vulnerable it was. In the aftermath, Reddit reinstated some moderator tools and attempted to repair its relationship with the community, but the damage was lasting. Trust in corporate leadership was at an all-time low, and Reddit's reputation as an unstable user-driven powder keg was cemented. Investors and advertisers were watching nervous about pouring money into a platform that seemed to be perpetually one scandal away from collapse. The 2015 revolt didn't just oust a CEO, it exposed a fundamental flaw in Reddit's DNA. The platform had grown too large to be run as a utopian experiment in community freedom, but any attempt at corporate oversight risked igniting backlash. Reddit was trapped in a paradox. It needed to evolve into a profitable, accountable company, but its very identity was tied to a user base that rejected authority. That tension would continue to haunt Reddit, setting the stage for the even more explosive battles of the years to come, when money data and the pressure of going public would collide with its fragile culture once again. After the chaos of 2015, Reddit limped forward under new leadership, trying to professionalize its operations while still clinging to the spirit of community that made it unique. But the deeper the company ventured into the world of business, the more it clashed with its users. By the time Reddit began preparing for its long-anticipated IPO in the early 2020s, the tension between grassroots ideals and corporate demands reached a breaking point. The scandals that followed weren't just about offensive subreddits or poor management decisions, they were about money power and the soul of the platform itself. The push toward becoming a publicly traded company forced Reddit to polish its image. Executives knew that investors would not tolerate a platform associated with harassment, piracy, or the darker subcultures that had once thrived on the site. In the years leading up to the IPO, Reddit began aggressively banning controversial communities, tightening content policies, and pushing for brand safety. To outsiders, these moves looked like necessary steps to modernize. But to longtime users, they felt like betrayal. The platform that once championed free speech now looked like it was scrubbing away its history in order to appeal to Wall Street. The greatest flashpoint came in 2023, when Reddit announced drastic changes to its API pricing. For years, third-party developers had built apps and tools that made browsing Reddit easier, and moderators relied heavily on these apps to manage their communities. But the new pricing model was so steep that it effectively killed many third-party apps overnight. The decision was widely interpreted as a naked cash grab designed to consolidate power and squeeze every dollar from the platform ahead of the IPO. The community response was explosive. In June 2023, thousands of subreddits went dark in protest, shutting down their communities and leaving vast portions of the site inaccessible. The so-called Reddit blackout quickly snowballed into one of the largest online protests in history. High-profile subreddits like RR Funny Outdoor Gaming and RR Ogshul joined the movement, sending a clear message: Reddit's corporate strategy was destroying the ecosystem that made the platform thrive. The blackout gained international media attention, with headlines framing it as a battle between grassroots users and corporate greed. Reddit leadership, however, refused to back down. CEO Steve Huffman, one of the platform's original founders, defended the changes by accusing third-party apps of exploiting Reddit's data without giving back. But his confrontational tone only inflamed the situation further. In interviews, he dismissed moderator concerns and suggested that the blackout was nothing more than a tantrum. For many, this confirmed what they had long suspected: Reddit's leadership no longer viewed its community as partners, but as obstacles. The protest eventually fizzled, but not without lasting consequences. Dozens of subreddit moderators quit in frustration, leaving some of the site's most vibrant communities weakened. Trust in leadership, already fragile, eroded further. Users who had once defended Reddit as the internet's last true community began to describe it as just another tech company. The scandal revealed the cold reality of the IPO. Reddit was no longer simply a community-driven experiment, but a corporation beholden to investors, advertisers, and growth targets. Layered on top of the API controversy was another issue that shook user trust: Reddit's decision to license its data to artificial intelligence companies. As AI models like ChatGPT exploded in popularity, tech giants began paying huge sums for access to large data sets. Reddit's posts and comments, billions of conversations spanning nearly 2 decades, were seen as a goldmine. When reports surfaced that Reddit was selling this data to train AI, many users felt betrayed. Their free contributions, written for fun or discussion, were now being monetized in ways they never consented to. The irony was glaring: a platform built on volunteer labor from moderators and unpaid content creators was preparing to profit massively from the very work those users had given away for free. For advertisers and investors, the strategy made sense. For the community, it was the ultimate insult. Reddit had once thrived on the idea that the users are the platform. Now those same users realized they were being treated as a product to be sold. The scandal sparked fierce debates about data ownership, privacy, and the ethics of monetizing online communities. As Reddit marched toward its IPO in 2024, the scars of the blackout and the AI controversy remained fresh. The platform that had once prided itself on transparency now looked opaque and corporate. Longtime users asked whether Reddit's soul had been lost forever, traded away for the promise of stock market glory. And while executives celebrated the company's growing valuation, the community that built Reddit from the ground up was left wondering if the front page of the internet had finally sold itself to the highest bidder. By the time Reddit entered the mid-2020s, its scandals had gone far beyond niche controversies. They were now global events, drawing the attention of governments, investors, and millions of users who recognized the platform as both indispensable and deeply flawed. What made Reddit unique was also what made it dangerous. It wasn't just another social media site where people passively scrolled. It was a massive living archive of human interaction. That gave it cultural weight, but it also meant that every scandal had ripple effects across the world. One of the most profound consequences was the erosion of trust. Reddit had once branded itself as a community-first platform where the users held the power. But with each crisis, from jailbait and celebrity photo leaks to moderator revolts and the API blackout, that trust was chipped away. By the time the company sold its data to train artificial intelligence, many users felt that the very essence of Reddit had been commodified. For ordinary people, it was a brutal reminder that nothing online was truly free. The comments and discussions they thought were theirs were actually assets to be monetized. That revelation fueled a growing skepticism not only toward Reddit, but toward social media at large. The scandals also sparked a cultural reckoning about the meaning of free speech in the digital age. Reddit had been celebrated as a frontier where all voices could be heard, but the reality showed that total freedom quickly bred toxicity. The bans of hateful subreddits in the mid-2010s and the stricter moderation that followed highlighted a contradiction. A platform cannot be both a true free-for-all and a safe, sustainable community. Other tech giants like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube wrestled with similar dilemmas, but Reddit's history of scandal made it the most visible case study. In a sense, Reddit became the cautionary tale of what happens when idealism collides with the need for control. Globally, the effects were far-reaching. In countries where censorship was heavy, Reddit once stood as a rare outlet for free expression. But as the platform leaned into corporate oversight, critics accused it of betraying those ideals. At the same time, the blackout protests of 2023 inspired digital communities around the world, proving that online users could coordinate massive resistance against corporate decisions. Reddit was both the problem and the proof of concept, a site that revealed the dangers of unchecked power, but also the potential of collective action. And yet, despite all the scandals, Reddit never collapsed. Its messy, chaotic structure, so often the source of its problems, was also what kept it alive. Unlike Facebook or TikTok, Reddit didn't depend on a single algorithm or a polished interface. Its strength came from its subreddits' decentralized communities that thrived independently. When one corner of Reddit was embroiled in controversy, another corner continued to flourish. This resilience gave it an almost paradoxical endurance. People might rage against Reddit's leadership, but they kept coming back for the communities they couldn't find anywhere else. That endurance also reflected the uncomfortable truth about internet culture: outrage doesn't always drive people away. Sometimes it binds them closer. Scandals became part of Reddit's identity, feeding its reputation as unpredictable, unruly, and authentic, in a way corporate platforms could never replicate. Even when users distrusted the executives, they trusted their subreddit communities. That dynamic allowed Reddit to survive crisis after crisis, even as other platforms faded. But survival came at a cost. For many, Reddit no longer symbolized freedom, but compromise. The internet's front page had been transformed into a battlefield between users demanding authenticity and a corporation chasing profit. The result was a platform that looked less like a community and more like a reflection of modern society itself, fractured, commodified, yet impossible to ignore. Reddit's scandals were not isolated incidents. They were warnings about the digital future we are all walking into. As Reddit continues to navigate its IPO era, the world watches with mixed feelings. To some, it remains an essential space for knowledge, humor, and solidarity. To others, it is a monument to the dangers of giving too much power to a company that relies on unpaid labor and user-generated content while profiting from both. Either way, Reddit has ensured its place in history not just as the front page of the internet, but as the platform that revealed the price of freedom online. Reddit's story is one of contradictions. Born as a bold experiment in free speech, it grew into a digital giant that shaped internet culture, only to find itself haunted by the very ideals that made it special. Each scandal, from the darkest subreddits to leaked celebrity photos from moderator revolts to the AI data controversy, exposed the impossible balance between community and control. What was once a rebellious playground became a corporation chasing profit, and in that transformation, something essential was lost. For longtime users, the scars run deep. Trust has been broken again and again, and yet Reddit endures not because of its leadership, but because of the people who keep its communities alive. That paradox defines the platform, a company constantly at war with itself, surviving, in spite of its scandals rather than because of them. It's a mirror held up to the internet itself, messy, chaotic, sometimes toxic, but impossible to walk away from. As Reddit moves forward in its new life as a public company, the question remains, can it ever reconcile its roots with the demands of investors? Or has the front page of the internet already sold its soul, leaving only the shell of what once made it extraordinary? The answer may not come tomorrow or even in the next few years, but the scars of its scandals will linger, shaping how we think about freedom, community, and the true cost of life online. And now it's over to you. Do you think Reddit can ever regain the trust it lost? Or is it destined to remain a cautionary tale of how power and profit can corrupt even the most idealistic visions of the internet? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the scandals behind the platforms that shape our world.